A notable step towards the commercial exploitation of space gave us some good news this week when a company from California, SpaceX, launched its Dragon cargo vehicle into space. The US government covered about a third of the cost of the launch. It was, said NASA, the beginning of a new era of exploration. Others in the private sector are in the queue, and one, founded by Google's Larry Page and Eric Schmidt, has revealed plans to mine asteroids using robots with the aim of bringing back precious metals such as platinum. Welcome to Agenda with George Friedman. George, lots of hype, nice headlines, but what's Stratfor's analysis of the significance of all this?
Well, I think we would say it's, from a technological point of view, it's not very significant. The launch itself was a step backward compared to what we were doing. That it was in private hands has a significance, but only because of the history of American technology development and how much of it came out of the federal government, how much of it came out of DoD. From the evolution of aircraft to microchips to the interstate highway system, which was developed as part of our national defense strategy, all the way to the internet, so much of our technology that we take for granted really originated either in wartime or within DoD's Department of the Army and Department of Navy. What happened is that much of the science, much of the technology was evolved within the Defense Department and places like that, and then was taken by private industry and applied. So basically the federal government was picking up the initial cost. What happened here with this launch and what made it so important in that sense was here we saw the basic technology developed over the years by NASA, by the Air Force and other entities being applied. It was being applied by private industry. Now, it was being applied almost a generation older than what we were doing, but it was applied. And so we are now seeing a very long story in American history being applied in space.
Other countries, Russia, the Europeans, and Japan, are well and truly up there with America in the space race. The US is even paying Russia roughly $60 million per astronaut to put them into orbit. But in terms of commercial applications, is the US now ahead?
I think the United States is probably ahead in the commercial application, if by that you mean purely private industry. If you mean the application of space to commercial projects, no, the Europeans, the Russians, and others have been using their spacelift capability for that probably as effectively or more effectively than we have. But we have another genius, which is not the application of technology. It's the application of large-scale organizations funded by private capital to exploit government-produced technology. That's what we really excel at. We talk about the tension between the private and public sectors. Historically, it's pretty much closer than you think. The development of the railroads in the Civil War, of telegraph in the Civil War, of all sorts of technologies through warfare, has led to a kind of process that's underway here. So what I would say is not that the United States is particularly good at applying technology. Rather, it is very good at applying government-produced technologies and sciences and transferring them into large-scale privately funded corporations.
What do you see as the most exciting possibilities for commercial exploitation? There's talk of mining platinum from asteroids. A figure of $50 billion retained from each asteroid has been bandied about.
Well, I think that most of the money of that is going to be made for the IPO of the company that says it's going to get platinum from asteroids, not from the asteroid itself. I think the most exciting thing, and I've written about this, about space, is free energy. That is to say, space is saturated with solar energy, and the transformation of that solar energy into electricity would represent a radical discontinuity in the history of energy, not only because of its effect on the environment, but I think in dropping the price of energy dramatically, which I think is going to be necessary. Space-based solar power beamed back to the Earth as microwave radiation is something that the Chinese have a program in, the Japanese have a program underway, Mitsubishi, the Europeans are exploring it, and NASA's exploring it. The key to that is lower cost launch, the ability to construct these platforms much more cheaply. And that's the most exciting thing in the programs that we're seeing now, because the one thing that industry is very good at, that government is not very good at, is lowering the cost of things. So if what we saw from this launch evolves into a commercially viable project that reduces the launch of cost, I think the most exciting outcome of this is going to be space-based energy. And I think that's not going to be tomorrow, but it will be something in the next 30 or 40 years that I think is going to become very real and very viable. As for finding platinum on asteroids, I think that'll be a very good reason why people will build rockets at the lowest cost possible to get people up to the asteroids. And like the gold rush in the United States, some people will become very wealthy, and most will land on piles of rock and get nothing. But in either case, we will get into space, and that'll open the door for other things.
George, I recall in your book, The Next 100 Years, you thought solar power from space would become a reality in about 2060. Does what's happened now alter your timeline?
Somewhere past the mid-century is where I thought this would become a very viable economic alternative. I think we're going to have space-based power prototypes and trials and so on much earlier than that, perhaps in the next 10 years or so. And I think it will become significant over the next 20 or 30. But what I'm looking at mid-century and beyond is space-based solar becoming a major source of energy. It sounds like science fiction, but everything we do sounds like science fiction before it happens. The cell phone, for example.
We've discussed the commercial potential. What about NASA and the US's government's program? Where's that headed now?
The government space program is going toward exploration of things without immediate commercial application. The commercial launch programs are going to profit-making capabilities. So you're seeing this divergence. But I suspect there's going to be a lot more coming out of the government in terms of application as we go forward, because as space becomes more and more important, it has a defense component. Defending space-based assets are going to be something the United States is going to be very interested in. Attacking other people's space-based assets. There is a treaty on this subject. I'm not sure how long it will be able to last as this evolves. But I think the government's main focus is not going to be in NASA. It's going to be in the U.S. Air Force, its Space Command, and the National Reconnaissance Office. Their projects are going to take a priority with the government, while SpaceX and other corporations like that are going to be looking at ways to reduce the cost of lift and make money from it.
So, summing up, George, this is a significant development, but not a technological advance.
It's not a technological breakthrough at all. It's an organizational breakthrough. I think it's a very good headline. But in the long run, when we look back on things in 20 or 30 years, this was part of the process of privatizing all the technology that has been developed by the United States in space since the 1950s. And that privatization is going to have profound effects on the cost of things, on the efficiency of things, simply because the U.S. is very good at doing that when it's in private hands and for a profit motive.
George, thanks very much. George Friedman, Stratfor's founder and CEO, ending this week's agenda. Thanks for being with us today. Goodbye.